Citizens Kane was one of the most influential cinematography pieces of its time. It documents the entire life of a newspaper tycoon named Charles Kane. Orson Welles takes advantage of every aspect of a shot, whether it's the foreground, midground, or background. Also, he takes advantage of the lighting. He takes advantage of camera movement, whether it's high angle or low angle shots, and also wides and close up. The wides in this video, I will show how cinematography plays a vital role in how we look and feel about Citizens Kane. I will also show how foreground, background, and midground play a vital role in how the viewer sees a person's importance in that particular shot, and also take a deeper insight on the lighting, on the light. I will also look at the lighting and how it plays a more omnipotent role and tells of events to come in Citizens Kane. First, we'll take a deeper look at how foreground, midground, and background, also how camera angles dictate the viewer's idea of the person's importance or power in a particular scene.
And if Fred Graves had any idea all this was going to happen, he'd have made out those certificates in both our names.
However, they were made out in Mrs. Kane's name.
He owed the money for the board to the both of us.
The bank's decision on all matters
I
concerning...
don't hold with signing my boy away to any bank as guardian.
I want you to stop all this nonsense,
The bank's
Jim.
decision on all matters concerning his education, his places of residence, and similar subjects is to be final.
The idea of a bank being the guardian.
I want you to stop all this nonsense, Jim.
We will assume full management of the Colorado load, of which I repeat, Mrs. Kane, you are the sole owner.
Where do I sign, Mr. Thatcher?
Right here, Mrs. Kane.
Mary, I'm asking you for the last time. Anybody'd think I hadn't been a good
The sum
husband,
of $50,000 a year is to be paid to you and Mr. Kane as long as you both live, and thereafter to the survivor.
Well, let's hope it's all for the best.
It is.
We see in this particular shot how foreground, midground, and background plays an important role on how the viewer views the importance of each individual. Mrs. Kane holds all the power because she is in the foreground, while Mr. Hatcher holds some power in the midground. The husband holds little or no power over Mrs. Kane's decision, and Charles Kane, playing in the background, holds the least amount of power. As we see too, the subjects in the background make the most noise, but they have the least amount of influence on the Mrs. Kane's decision. That goes to show that Orson Welles is trying to show that even though they talk the most, that doesn't make them visually the most important, as we will see in another clip.
Use money
to buy things. Buy things. My mother should have chosen a less reliable banker. Well, I always gagged on that silver spoon. You know?
Again, we see this in this particular shot where the banker has most of the control, followed by Mr. Hatcher, and then Charles has the least control. Even though the banker says a few words, both Charles and Mr. Hatcher have a lot of words to say, but the viewer knows that the banker in this situation, because of the depression, is in control of both Charles's and Mr. Hatcher's future. Now I will take a closer look on how tilts, creating high angle and low angle shots, play a vital role in power.
You did send him a check for $25,000, didn't you?
Yes. I sent him a check for $25,000. Declaration of Principles.
What?
In this clip, we see that even though Susan is the loudest out of the two of them, Mr. Kane still holds the power in the scene. His decision on whether to or what to do or what he's reading has more impact or influence on the audience rather than what Susan is saying. And the audience gets entrapped in to see what Mr. Kane will do with the declaration. Now we will look at how lighting in Citizen Kane does a great job of foreboding the future.
I wouldn't have even been up this late.
It's a matter of habit.
I wonder what the servants will think.
They'll think we enjoyed ourselves.
Yes.
Didn't we?
I don't see why you have to go straight out to the newspaper.
You never should.
Do you know how long you kept me waiting last night while you went to the newspaper for 10 minutes? What do you do on a newspaper in the middle of the night?
Emily, my dear, your only correspondent is the Inquirer.
Sometimes I think I'd prefer a rival of flesh and blood.
Oh, Emily, I don't spend that much time on the newspaper.
It isn't just the time. It's what you print. Junior, the most incredible atrocity yesterday, Charles. I simply can't have it in the nursery.
Mr. Bernstein is apt to pay a visit to the nursery now and then.
Does he have to?
Yes.
Really, Charles? People will think...
What I tell them to think.
When the relationship first is a bloom, we see a high key lighting on his wife. But as the relationship deteriorates, so does the lighting, and now we see a higher contrast. This is a great and ingenious way of showing the deterioration of the relationship over time without even mentioning it or even making a note of it to the viewers themselves.
Are going to be allowed to interfere with that truth. I'll also provide them with a fighting and tireless champion of their rights as citizens and as human beings. Signed,
We see a shadow over his face. Orson Welles is a master of using lighting to show or give the viewers hints or clues as to what might happen in the future. As you see later on, Mr. Kane does not fulfill his promise.
What's that?
Declaration of Principles.
What?
Hmm?
What is it?
An antique.
You're awful funny, aren't you? Well, I can tell you one thing you're not going to keep on being funny about, and that's my singing. I'm through. I never wanted to in the first place.
You'll continue with your singing, Susan. I don't propose to have myself made ridiculous.
You don't propose to have yourself made ridiculous.
In this we see Mr. Kane tearing up the declaration and breaking his promise. This signifies that he really wasn't for the people, but in terms for himself, and somewhere along the line, he loses himself.
I will not tell them to you again. You will continue with your singing.
In this scene, Mr. Kane's shadow overtakes Susan, giving us a sense that because he's forcing her to sing, something will happen to her. And we shall see this in the next clip as Susan becomes sick.
Charlie, I couldn't make you see how I felt, Charlie. But I couldn't go through with the singing again.
In conclusion, Citizen Kane to me was a pioneer in both lighting, mise-en-scenes, shot placement, high angle, low angles, and the use of every aspect of a framing in filming and is one of the most must-see movies for filmmakers to learn how to form the aesthetics of certain shots and certain looks in film.